Estás viendo Canal América, televisión dominicana para el mundo.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your fears.
Welcome to A Time for Truth show. I'm your host, Dr. Bernard Fialkoff, and I want to welcome you again in this new year, 2022. Amazing. We're going to have a great year, and there's many things that have changed over the course of the past few years. And today we're going to deal with something very important, really for all societies and the globe, and that's the crucible in which our civilization is built. And that crucible are our women. Because if you look at it, without women, without our mothers, none of us would be here. So I think that's a good enough reason right there. But obviously, it goes much deeper than that in terms of the structure, the nurturing, the guidance, the discipline that we need to get at times, and the hope and the love that comes from all women, mothers, and our world. So today we're very honored to have a very special guest. And Buddha, if you can put our pictures up of our guest today, Dr. Faye Williams. There you go. And there she is with the Honorable Johnny Ford. Dr. Faye Williams, Esquire, PhD, Doctor of Ministry, a graduate of Grambling University. She's President and CEO of Natural Health Options of Washington, D.C., which provides unlimited economic empowerment opportunities for small business owners. Dr. Williams has exclusive manufacturing, marketing, and distribution rights to natural products created from the work of the scientific genius, Dr. George Washington Carver. And she served as national president of the Grambling Alumni Association, national chair of the National Congress of Black Women, chief staff to a council member, and general counsel to U.S. congressman. Dr. Faye is a teacher, a minister, administrator, a business owner, a talk show host, a peace and human rights activist, an attorney, an author, and a humanitarian. I think we've just about covered the entire dictionary. Quite a human being. The doctor has appeared on radio and television programs, BET, CBS, CNN, Good Morning America, The David Brinkley Show, the Canadian Broadcasting System, C-SPAN, and she appears as a regular commentator and panelist and news talk show host on several radio and television programs. She's a prolific public speaker internationally and has served as keynote speaker at major conventions, churches, universities, conferences, and spoke on diverse topics of health, human rights, spirituality, politics, women's affairs, inspirational talks, motivation, and many, many others. Her awards include They Dare to Speak Out Award, Top Ladies of Distinction, Distinguished Alumni Award, Outstanding Business Leader Award, Delta Legacy Award, the History Makers, and many, many others. She was named Ebony Magazine's 100 Most Influential Black Americans and has been listed in Who's Who amongst Black Americans and Who's Who amongst women. Dr. Williams serves on numerous boards of directors, and her programs include Women Who Felt Good About Themselves, Women in Struggle, Nothing Human Can Be Alien to Us, What Kind of Friend Are You, Dare to Speak the Truth to Power, It's Time for You to Pick Up Your Baton, Where's Your Faith, If You Want to Run with the Big Dogs, Sow Seeds for the Crop You Want to Yield, Give Your Enemies a Nervous Breakdown, Who Will Go for Us, Whom Shall We Send, Women Who Hold Up the Skies, I'm Not the Enemy, We Can Talk Anytime. So I am very, very happy and honored, and I want to welcome to our show on Buddha. If you can bring her up on the screen, I want to welcome to a Time for Truth show, Dr. Faye Williams. Welcome to the show, Doc.
Well, thank you so much. Now that you've told your listeners my life story, I don't know that there's much for us to talk about, is there?
Well, you know what? That would be true if I didn't abbreviate it. So not only that, I left out you have a great sense of humor, too.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm certainly happy to be with you. It's been a while since we were together in Atlanta. And
That's
Hunter,
right.
as a matter of fact, he's the one who brought us together. I think that he sees that as his job in life is to bring people together, and it's wonderful. I've met wonderful people like you since I've known him, and I think I'll be seeing him soon in Orlando. We have a meeting together there.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? Robert Hunter really lives up to his title as a globetrotter, because you never know what he's going to do next, and you never know what he's going to introduce you to.
I noticed that first picture that you showed, that was of Mayor Johnny Ford from Tuskegee, Alabama. And that's significant because he chairs the World Conference of Mayors. He also is a person who brings people together from all over the world. I've met so many people working with him, and I serve on his board of directors now.
Well, yeah, he's another prolific humanitarian. And, I too, like you, I'm very happy to have them as my friends. And so I wanted to ask you, because in reality, you have such a diverse and broad background that we could almost go anywhere. So I wanted to ask you, first of all, is what's motivated you? Because most people would have been happy to do one of the things that you did. So what has been your motivation all of these years?
Well, I've just been blessed to have a lot of opportunities. I mean, obviously there have been some setbacks too. Everything has not been success, but I had a mother who had 7 daughters, and she wanted to make sure that we all had whatever education we wanted to have, to be able to travel, to do things, not just for ourselves, but to be helpful to others. I remember as a little girl, my mother had all of us go out in the neighborhood seeking petitions from the neighbors. And when I say the neighbors, I mean they were far apart. We were from the country, but we had to walk miles to get to the homes of neighbors, get them to sign petitions so that we could get a school bus to come and pick up not just her children, but all of the children. And of course, before we got the school bus, we were so far back in the woods that we had to actually get a gravel road. So we had to work to get that done before we could get the bus. But my mother always made it clear to her children, whatever we said we wanted to be in life, she found a way to help us to do it. And we appreciated that so much that we worked hard at what we wanted to do. I had an opportunity to attend college. I attended all kinds of colleges and universities all over the world, as a matter of fact. I've worked all over the world. And my mother never told me I couldn't do something. It was basically always she told me I had to be responsible for what I did. And she taught me that responsibility. I always wanted to travel. So those opportunities came up, and my mother never tried to stop me from doing anything I wanted to do, so long as I was responsible.
You know, it sounds like she gave you such a tremendous grounding in real principles. And as I'm listening to you, you know, makes a lot of sense of how you accomplished so much with what she instilled in you at an early age and on accomplishing. I think that's one of the things that's missing in today's world is too many people just think, well, they want something, so it's supposed to happen, and they don't realize that there's some work to it. So
Absolutely. You know, my mother would always, my mother was not a highly educated woman, but she had a lot of sense. And the things that she taught her daughters was that we had to find a way to do things. She helped us wherever she could to find a way to accomplish things. She knew when I decided I wanted to go to college, she didn't have the money to send me, but she found a way to do it. And of course, I had pretty good grades, so I was, you know, an easy sell on that. I had a chance to go, but I also knew I had to work while I was in college. And I knew that if I encountered bills in college, I would have to be responsible for those bills. And that's the way she was with all of her daughters. But she never wanted us to use the excuse that, well, we were girls and we couldn't do that or we couldn't get involved. So when people ask me if I can do certain things, my answer always is, I don't know, give me a couple of minutes and I probably will know how. So that's how I was able to develop so many degrees and to learn so much from people, because I was never afraid to meet a challenge. And my mother always supported me in what I did.
it's a great way of doing it. One of the things I was going to say is we recently had a show on A Time for Truth that had to do with education. And one of the things that we actually went over is that education actually starts in the home. And it's
Yes.
way too underrated. So what I would say is your mother had tremendous education because she had common sense, she knew how to exert discipline, and so much of this is missing today, where we have a lot of our youth come out supposedly educated. They're academically educated, but they have no idea how to get along with others, how to communicate. And without that, really, it's like giving somebody a car and not giving them any gasoline or where to ride or where they're going or how to do it. So I actually, want to validate her, because, and all the women out there, since we're going to have this show with you, and I know that you do so much for women, is that that's one thing that I've realized, is that if you really take a look at the importance of what they create and what all my wife and all women create, it's really something that has to be acknowledged so that our country, our globe can go forward in a more family way. But I wanted to ask you something, because I know that you were involved with Dick Gregory and you wrote a book about him. So I
Yes.
wanted to ask you, tell us a little bit about your association, the book, and all these things.
Well, I met Dick Gregory when I ran for the United States Congress in my home state of Louisiana. Never before had an African American run for Congress there, run a viable campaign for Congress. But that didn't really matter to me, that no one had done it before. Somebody had to get started. And my friend that I mentioned to you before we were on the air, Congressman Irvin Daimler, was another person who always encouraged me to do the things that I wanted to do. He would make some suggestions, and usually they were great suggestions. Well, one of the things he did was introduce me to Dick Gregory when I was running for the United States Congress. And Dick Gregory just happened to be in Louisiana at the time, visiting his daughter at Louisiana State University. And Congressman Daimler invited him to come over to one of my political events. He did. He listened to all the things that I kept saying my mother taught me, and he came up on the stage, and with no preparation, he began talking, and he just said, "Oh, I need to talk with your mother, because my children don't remember a thing I said. All the things you think that your mother taught you and you remember them." He said, "Only time I get to talk with my children is to pull my chair up to the refrigerator, because I know they're going to be coming there at some time." But my mother taught us there was always a time for truth, and that's why I like the name of your program so much, A Time for Truth. I can remember when I was a little girl, and the toothpaste tube came up chewed up. And my mother asked all of us who if we did it, and we all said no, no, no. And so she lined us up and she decided to ask the question again. She started from the oldest down to the youngest, and each of us said, no, ma'am, we didn't. No, ma'am, we didn't. All the way down. When we got to the baby girl, she said, yes, ma'am. Well, she didn't get that little switch on her leg because my mother knew she told the truth. She wasn't sure about us, though, so she wanted to teach us the importance of telling the truth and that you don't get punished for telling the truth, you know.
Well, you know what? As a surgeon, I had a kind of a lesson taught to me, or a way of being a doctor, by a surgeon who had gotten this prestigious award. His name was Sol Ewan. And he said something to me one day. He goes, if you're an honest doctor, you don't have to be smart. And I said, what are you talking about? He goes, I'll tell you why. If you're an honest doctor, years from now, when a patient comes to you and is upset with you and say, why did you do what you did? You say, well, wait one moment, let me take a look. And you'll either look in their mouth or you look at the x-rays from back then and you go, oh, I see that you had this and that and this, and that's why we did what we did. And so you don't have to be smart because you won't have to remember anything. And so I agree with you totally. Yes. Sometimes an honest manner is much easier to get along with. It's not so stressful.
And, you know, I want to go back to Mr. Gregory. I introduced how I met him, but I came to Washington and one day he asked me to come and pick him up in Baltimore on a Friday afternoon. Well, you live in a big city, so you know what the traffic is like then. And I hesitated for a while, but he was so charming, I decided to go and pick him up. And on the way back, I got to know him. And when I decided to write the book, he had passed away, actually, and I was the last person in the room with him when he passed away. I had been there with him all week while he was in the hospital. And one of the last things I heard him say was, wake up and stay woke, which became the name of the book that I wrote about him. But he was always the teacher. Even that day that he left us, he was teaching us about the importance of waking up to various truths, learning them, and acting on those truths. And so I wrote the book actually as a matter of therapy for myself because I missed him so much. We had been doing all kinds of things together. We would travel all around the world protesting anything and anybody who deserved to be protested. And I missed that. So the way that I, decided to calm myself down and I wanted to leave a memory of him so that people knew he was more than just a comedian, even though that was important because he always thought that laughter was good for the soul. But he was not only a comedian, he was a nutritionist, and he did so many things that people just don't know about. So he talked, he gave lots of advice, he gave health advice to people. He taught us the importance of exercise and drinking water and just so many things. So I wanted people to know about those things so they wouldn't remember him just as a comedian, as important as that was.
It's very interesting, and I can really understand what you're saying about him because the more I learn about entertainers, the more I see how much depth they have to them. People think of them just as maybe a singer or, like you said, a comedian, but in reality, they're really expansive. And, I've read and heard many times that really artists are what bring imagination and the future to our world. So that must have been a very special, relationship you had with Mr. Gregory. I was going to ask you, if you were going to sum up what his goal would have been or is for the world, what would you say Dick Gregory's goal is for the world?
It would be that he would want all of us to be peaceful, that we would love one another, we would always be truthful with one another. And it doesn't matter what nationality, what culture we are, we're all human beings, and we basically want the same thing for ourselves and for our families and friends. And that is what we should do. Of course, he read a lot. He knew something about so many things around the world, and he would just buy hundreds, even thousands of dollars worth of newspapers from around the world because he thought that we don't really get a picture of what life is like until we know what other people are doing around the world too. And I would go shopping with him sometimes, and he would, of course, buy, as I said, hundreds and thousands of dollars worth of books and magazines. And you should see my house, because that's what my house looks like, a library with all the books around me.
Well, good for you.
Excuse me. I'm
So,
sorry.
I said good for you.
Oh, okay. Actually, I have
Absolutely.
several rooms in my house, and I named them for people. I guess you could say that my second floor living room is probably dedicated to Congressman Daimler and Dick Gregory. And then I have another room which is dedicated, I call it my Cicely Tyson library room, because that's where I have the most of my books. And she always liked sleeping in that room. Once she passed away in February, I had the room dedicated to her, painted it in her favorite colors and all, so it's still there. But every one of my rooms has books, and there is a name for that room.
Well, you know, I didn't realize it, but now I see we have even more in common, because that's what I love doing, collecting different memorabilia and things that have happened and bringing them to life in their own space. My wife says that, you know, I'm very sentimental, and that if I could, I'd probably have a whole building full of rooms, and which is probably true. Probably true. What I was gonna ask you is, as a minister also, because you're an attorney, politician, but as a minister, what do you feel from the religious or the spiritual side? What do you see needs to happen in our country?
Well, first of all, I have to say what we often say in the Black community is we need to have a come to Jesus minute, so that we can talk about what's going on. We need a lot of mental health. We need a lot of mental health treatment in this country, because there are obviously people that we blame for what they're doing, and they're not responsible because of their own mental health. I wish we could put more and more and more dollars into mental health, because it isn't always the fault of that person that they don't have it straight. They just simply can't help themselves. And those of us who've had opportunities, who've been able to get to know people and know what people should be doing, we need to have the money, the know-how, the wherewith to get around and to be in those communities and teach people, help them. We can't do everything through the church, but the church is important in the Black community in particular. I would just say that we need to make sure everybody has a Bible, and not get really stuck on any one particular thing or one particular kind of religion, because I think we all have good points in all of the religions that we have. Mr. Gregory would always say there is a universal God, and if we accepted that there is a universal God, then we would know the goodness that we should be teaching people, and that we should be treating them in that way. So I think the church has a big responsibility, bigger than just raising money and telling people how they can get rich doing various things. We need people who are willing to sit down with others, no matter who they are or what their circumstances are, and not just be concerned about the tithe or what they can give to the church, but rather what the church can also give to them. I'm blessed. I belong to a small church, so I have an opportunity to have a lot of interaction with people. And by the way, next Sunday I'm doing the message at church. I don't call mine sermons, I call them messages. And I'll be teaching about forgiveness, because that is so important. You know, sometimes when someone does something to us, we never forget, we never forgive them. And the forgiveness is for us. It's not for the person who has wronged us. When we learn that concept, then we will know how to treat people, and we will be better off ourselves. Mr. Gregory always taught us how dangerous it is to have fear, to be angry, to have hate in our heart, to have jealousy. And if we could just know that those are things that are not hurting the other person, they're hurting us. So we're damaging ourselves. And those are concepts that you don't have to go to church in order to learn those, but it does help to pick up the good book sometimes and see what it is we should be doing.
Makes a whole hell of a lot of sense, and you know, it's so true. Some people go around with so much guilt
Yes.
and remorse, and their it seems like their whole day is a gloom and doom, and you know, I see that sometimes in my practice.
Yeah, and a lot of times they could be healed if they would change what they are doing. But sometimes it's more convenient for people to blame somebody else for their condition rather than taking care of themselves and straightening out the things with them that are wrong. And as I said, Mr. Gregory always taught those things about anger and jealousy and fear and hate. I mean, they're just not helpful. And people, will always say, "Well, you seem to be so healthy and whatever." But it's because I work on myself. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be angry at anybody. I don't want to fear anybody because, again, as Mr. Gregory taught me, fear and God do not occupy the same space. And I believe there is a universal God.
But you know what? You're saying a lot of things that make so much sense, and I want to really make sure our viewers get what you're saying, because you can see what Dr. Williams has done and how she's applied discipline, how she's continued to educate herself on top of all this education she's had, and is really a model for all of us. What I wanted to ask you, because we've come to the last few minutes, what would you like to conclude and state to our viewers, and what take-home message do you want to leave them with, Dr. Williams? Go ahead.
I would just like to say that every human being is important. We're all God's children, and we should just decide to take away the labels like Democrat or Republican or whatever. Take away all the labels and the different kinds of religions and just come together and have a vote of what's right and what's wrong, and let people decide what is right and what is wrong. I think we spend too much time labeling each other and then having to argue about which of those labels is correct and which one is not. And as Mr. Gregory always said, and I think I have a responsibility to live up to it, and that is the African proverb, which he often used, that it is the women who hold the sky up. And I wish all of my sisters would learn to love one another and pass that love on to their families. We can excuse the fact sometimes that the men aren't doing that. Let them do the fighting if they have to, but let us be that loving one when they are around, when they come home, when the children see us and how we act. Mr. Gregory always used to say, too, that the two most important forces in this world are the Black woman and the Black church. In our community, that is what we believe. And I wish for every community that is the way you would believe about your community, and you could justify it through the actions that you have.
Beautiful concluding statement. I want to thank Mr. Robert Hunter and Johnny Ford for having us brought the both of us together on this show. And I want to thank you, Dr. Faye Williams, because, I really enjoyed listening to you on this show. And I know that our viewers have a lot of take-home messages that you can take and apply. And let's do what Dr. Williams is saying. Let's just look at each other and realize that we're in the same planet. We all want to have our own beliefs. There's no reason to fight about that, but let's get along and let's make a better world.
Also, I want to say, Dr. Bernard, is to understand that because I love my community and promote my community very loudly all the time, doesn't mean that I hate your community. We just need to know more about each other's community that we can love. And that's each of our responsibilities to reach out and to do just that. And again, I thank Bobby for introducing us. I'm glad to have met you. You were wonderful from the first time I saw you. Hope you had a chance to read my book. Also, Mayor Ford brings people together, as I said. And right now we're working on the Rosa Parks resolution. Don't know if you've heard about it, but we're trying to make a federal holiday for Rosa Parks' birthday. She was indeed a loving person and helped us to do some things to make our nation a better nation. Thank you so much. I love you for having me on. I love you. I love you. I love you.
Well, thank you again. And for all the viewers out there, let's just work together and move forward. Have a very happy beginning to 2022. And may we all grow kinder, closer, and all our communities realize that we can get along.
Yes.
Good night.
Love you.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your feet